and hide thee in the dust for fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humble, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day.
Hello. I gotta do something about my video fan. I can hear it in my headphones, and I can't do anything to stop it. That means you must hear it. Yeah, there's no hope. Okay, well, sorry about the clicking noise that's going to be going on constantly. I don't know. I did blow the computer out and all that. We're continuing in the book of Isaiah. So I hit start stream before I was technically ready, and I'm having trouble getting started today. Anyways, so chapter 2, verse 11. I don't know if it's like, yeah, it's actually louder in the headphones. I feel like if I could, sounds like it's almost finished, doesn't it? All right, chapter 2, verse 11 is where we left off. Remember, we'd kind of discovered that chapter 2 was kind of all one thing. It's kind of like an inversion. It starts off, and then it goes to something else, and it comes back around again. But I wish I wasn't so distracted by that huge amount of noise coming. I don't know why it's first thing in the morning I get tons of noise like that. I gotta ignore it. It's not easy for me to ignore things like that. I wish I could just turn off my video card. All the other fans can be replaced. Oh, wait. This probably won't help. But... this is a way to ruin a... This is like textbook how to ruin a live stream. Start doing computer maintenance. Okay. That didn't help at all, but hey. The lofty looks of man shall be humbled, the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. And we talked about how, you know, when the day of the Lord comes, you know, we talked about how there was this, you know, God had made these promises for Israel that they should, well, that they would be a blessing to many nations, and sort of this passage sort of visualizes what the world could be like if that was so. If Israel was a blessing to the nations, if God was their king, and how the nations would react to this. Okay, and then, sorry, you know, their peace would break out and all that, but the reality on the ground is that man has, well, not man, but the Israelites have corrupted the ways of the Lord and have earned judgment for themselves. Specifically, the northern tribes are going to be taken captive by the Assyrians, and the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin and the remnant that is with them of the other tribes. Because, you know, when they busted up the kingdoms, they busted up politically by tribe, not by family. So you have, that's why in the New Testament you'll encounter people of other tribes than Judah and Benjamin. It's not just Judah and Benjamin. But anyways, the Israelites would be punished by the Assyrians invading. That's Isaiah's message. And carrying them away captive. And the Assyrian is, of course, the type of an antichrist. It is the enemy. It's an important lesson because God uses the enemy to punish. If you look at the book of Revelation, you get a sense that, you know, of all the plagues that come on the world, perhaps the beast is the worst of all. Because the beast is the deciding factor. I mean, it's, you know, you can be smitten with plagues and all sorts of, you know, disasters, but that doesn't necessarily do the real damage. the real damage to your soul. To your the one who's going to seduce people to fall away from Christ, the one who's going to seduce people to worship him, the one who's going to seduce people to take the mark of the beast. The old enemies, like the Assyrians and the Babylonians, it's much more carnal. They're an army, but there's also armies. Armies exist in, they can make physical war, but there's also, like we have the Salvation Army. They are sort of making war on poverty, making war on human suffering. We have the war on drugs. There are metaphorical wars. There are metaphorical battles and warriors and metaphorical armies. And not all armies, even if they aren't metaphorical, are specifically for violence. We could unleash an army of teachers, or an army of cobblers, or an army of blacksmiths. It just means a lot of them to go do what they do. That they should all act as one. And certainly, we see an army in the book of Revelation, like the locust army of chapter 9. And they have a king over them who is the angel of the bottomless pit. Oh, good, that noise kind of settled down a bit. So, we talked about this, all this stuff, okay. And so when the day of the Lord comes, it's after all this, usually it's not the punishment itself. The Assyrian coming is not, the day of the Lord is not one day. It's sort of like, the day of the Lord is not so much about a time period as it is what happens in a time period. And it's the time when, it's like, they say a new day is dawning. There's a new order. Like you wake up and there's a new government, there's a new king, there's a new something or other. It's new. A new day has dawned. Now that new day, in a symbolic sense, does not have to be one day. The day of the Lord is not so much about a day as it is about what happens. It's about God coming and setting things right. And I usually do think of the day of the Lord as the day God comes. And that is true, but God comes in more than one way. For example, God came in the form of Jesus. He came as a suckling child and was born of a virgin. Now, God can also come in the form of the burning bush, right? But there's also a coming in the sense of him coming in power. Like in that book of Revelation, chapter 19, we see a white horse, and on the white horse we have one like unto the Son of Man. He that sat upon him was faithful and true in righteousness, he doth judge and make war. One whose name is called the Word of God, the Lord Jesus. He's riding the white horse and he comes. And that's the coming of the Lord. But also sometimes the Lord comes through the enemy. Meaning when the Babylonians come to carry you away captive, the day of the Lord has come. The day the Lord promised would come has come. A lot of times the day of the Lord is just the day God has promised. And if you think about it as the day God has promised, then you can sort of see why it fits over time. Meaning the day that God promised refers to the Assyrian invading, but it also refers to the Antichrist appearing, because they're typical. Just like I talk about the mark, we had a great example this last year of a type of mark of the beast, because it is not the mark of the beast, but it is very much like the mark of the beast. And I'm talking about mask wearing, and also the suggested vaccine passport, because they both could be easily. Well, one. The mask thing was tied to buying and selling. My wife went into a store and they wouldn't do business with her because she wasn't wearing the mask. And maybe that's a bit, you say, well, that's a bit, silly, blah, blah, blah. It's so easy. Well, the mark of the beast is easy too. You just take it, There's no consequences other than down the road. Other than selling your soul to Satan. And so, I disagree. It's one thing, I have no problem wearing a mask. In fact, I did for a few weeks. But, and I have committed to wearing one improperly when I'm forced to. It's not the mark of the beast, but it functions like the mark of the beast. And if you did yourself a favor and tried out, I mean, there's not a lot of consequences. Go ahead and try not wearing a mask. I mean, live a little. Try an adventure. Go out without a mask where everyone is wearing a mask and see what it feels like. It's a good test. It gives you a decent feeling of sort of, what it might be like to live in a world where people have the mark of the beast. And where if you don't, everyone knows it, and you're not allowed to participate. We had a good sample of that. And I'm glad I got to try it out and see. I'm like, okay. When I tell myself that I won't take the mark of the beast, I might have some ground to stand on. Because I know what it takes to resist peer pressure when the whole world is going one way and you think you ought to go another. And believe me, the pressure is going to be even more with the mark of the beast. It's not going to be, they're not going to play nice. And some people didn't play nice this time around. Yeah, but it's the same kind of thing. Same kind of thing. Without it, you can't do business. I mean, you can't, quote unquote. Point is, it's like, I've always thought that the mark of the beast, it's like, no man can buy or sell save he that had the mark or the number of his name, or, and all this stuff. I was like, well, I got his number all right. I get your number right here. And that's how I feel when I go out. I feel like I have the number of the beast. I know how to get around him. I know how to go out there, and I don't know if that's going to work. I always suspected that there'd be some way to work around the market, meaning that the no man can buy or sell is about permission and about what's supposed to be. You know what I mean? And a lot of people are going to be against you. But it's not strictly so. People say, how will you... People always took that passage and said, well, okay, wow, it's absolute. We got to have a chip that they scan. I don't think they need a chip or anything. I mean, and the phone thing isn't exactly the mark of the beast, but you see, it isn't printed on you. But at the same time, if you don't have that little symbol for the vaccine passport, maybe you can't travel internationally. Maybe you can't do that. I don't think it's going to be. I just think it's way too unpopular. And they needed to push this early on. It's kind of... they have a nice little catch-22. You can't bring out the vaccine passport early in the pandemic because you have no vaccine. And no matter how fast you've developed the vaccine, by the time you develop it, the pandemic is just about over. So vaccine passports make no sense. I mean, they make no sense. All they are is an invasion of your privacy and a attempt to steal your freedom. That's all they really are, because they have no point at all. I mean, meaning they're like, by the time, you know what I'm saying? Like by the time they roll it out, everyone's vaccinated, or enough people that it doesn't matter anymore. And I don't recommend getting the vaccine, yes. I wouldn't want to be first in line to get it. I may get it next year, yeah. I may get it for wrestling. If they require me to, I just may do it. Because it doesn't mean that much to me that I won't risk it. Now, it's just like having my kids wrestle. There's risks with that, too. There's risks with going out and breathing the air. And it's like, and yeah, men make things difficult, and they make you do things you don't want to do. They could hurt you. But, I don't advise it. No. Especially if you've had it, don't. Because to me, that's like pointless. I already had it. I'm not going to get a vaccine on top of having already had it. That sounds just completely ridiculous. It doesn't, it's just a question of getting, they just want, what they do is they're only interested in having everyone obey. There's no interest in, like they don't want to hear your side, your reasoning. All the medical professionals wants is total obedience, which you should never give them because they have no right to ask it. All right, I'm off the track. But the day of the Lord of hosts, when it comes, whether it's by God himself returning in the person of Christ, or, whether we extend that day to include the whole tribulation, so to speak, meaning it's the day when God's promises are fulfilled. When you start seeing everything God said would happen, that's the day of the Lord. Or the day, or maybe not, maybe in a technical sense, maybe the day of the Lord is the last day, but oftentimes it is spoken of as an overarching period. So, it's not, what I'm saying is it's not strictly so. Not strictly so. Like if I were to say in the day of Hitler, in Hitler's day, it was different. I don't know why I go right to Hitler. In Winston Churchill's day, in Jesus' day, they didn't have cars. And so day does not, in some context, especially something when it says the day of the Lord, it's like, is that one day? It is several days throughout history that it could be called the day of the Lord. Like when the Assyrians showed up at the walls of Jerusalem, that was the day of the Lord, where the lofty looks of man are humble. All the people are saying, they're not going to come. It's not going to happen. The Assyrians, there's no way they're going to take us. Here they are outside the gates of our city. Here they are. The day we said would never come has come. Now everything God has said is upon us. The day of the Lord has come. When that happens, everyone that is proud and lofty, everyone that is lifted up, they are brought low. All their high words against the Lord of hosts, all their high words against his servants, all their high words against the truth, made into lies in a day, in a very short time. That's the only thing about a day. It is a limited period of time. It's not like really an age. Well, you could say in the days of the Roman Empire. But you wouldn't even consider that the day of the Roman Empire. You might say there's an interesting thing because we'll say in the day of so-and-so, and also in the days of. And I guess I would prefer to say the days of the Roman Empire, or in the day of someone else, because based on what that I'm talking about. Meaning, if I was going to talk to the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire had there's so much to their history and so much time, it seems hard to call it one day. It seems like what are you talking about? The day of the Republic, the days of the Republic, or the days of the Empire? There's different times in that empire's period where day does not really cover it, and it feels artificial to say singular day. But every dog has his day. That's what I'm saying, and that's the point. Is that like there is a period of time in which things shake out in a certain way, and that is what we're talking about symbolically as the day. All right, everyone that is proud and lofty, everyone that is lifted up, and he shall be brought low. Now he could have just left it at verse 12 and just skipped down to verse 18. Because it's basically a repetition. And he goes on to all these things. The cedars of Lebanon that are high and lifted up. The oaks of Bashan. The high mountains. The hills. High tower. Fence wall. So all these inanimate objects, places referred to instead of people. It starts off saying everyone that is lifted up and lofty, and they're going to be brought low. But then he refers to all these geographic locations like, cedars of Lebanon, oaks of Bashan. What's that mean? Well, it's just a symbolic rendering of the idea of the people who are high and lifted up. They're symbolized in prophecy often as cedars. In fact, I have a song, Ezekiel 31. Behold, the Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon, with fair branches, and with his shadowing shroud, and his top was among the thick boughs. And the tree there is referring to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Meaning that he is sort of exalted above all these other exalted trees. Meaning there are some pretty important people in your society, right? We have very important people in our society, right? We have celebrities. We have government officials. Now, I don't know exactly how to divide up the cedars of Lebanon and the oaks of Bashan. Lebanon was known for its forestry and the trees in the ancient Near East. In that time, they went there for the cedars in Lebanon. They're very tall, right? And the oaks of Bashan. Bashan was more of a bottomland, I believe, for grazing. So it'd be like a savanna with some trees and a lot of grass. And it's funny because you look at that, you think of that. Do you think of Israel as a land of trees? Well, it is, and it was. Except for poor land management over the ages has diminished. There are people who know how to restore a desert back to green. And one of the ways they do it is with actually livestock, grazing animals. Grazing animals maintain the savanna, amazingly. Okay, so all the oaks of Bashan. So these and my mind starts trying to who are these are the cedars of Lebanon, the logging industry, and the oaks of Bashan, the farming lobby. I don't know, the most powerful man in your area. High mountain. But what I'm saying is, we start off with cedars of Lebanon, oaks of Bashan, high mountains, hills. Mountains and hills are also symbolic of nations, or obviously we're talking about it. Well, we could be talking about nations because it's not just about Israel. I mean, the Assyrian did not just invade Israel; it took captive many nations and conquered many, and so, they are the power of God lifting them up is going over all the nations round about them that are exalted and high, powerful and rich. Upon every high tower, every fenced wall. Let's get a little more close to the truth because it's their cities. And what I would say is, probably speaking, honestly, as I think about this, you could look at these as symbolizing different classes of exalted persons. Celebrities and politicians. I mean, they're all included. But the cedars of Lebanon, oaks of Bashan, the wood from Lebanon was used to build Jerusalem. The oaks of Bashan was used to build Jerusalem. The temple of God was built out of the cedars of Lebanon. You know what I mean? And also the king's house. And all the great buildings of the Israelites were built from the wood obtained from Lebanon and Bashan, the oak, the cedar, the high mountains. The cities were built on usually outcroppings of rock or on mountains and hills. We don't know, not like the Rocky Mountains, but like a small mountain. All the high mountains, a small, but they would be large for that area. They'd be relatively large, but there are even higher mountains we know, and they symbolize great nations. But also the nations that the Assyrians going to invade, they have, their cities are, how homes have wooden doors and gates, and they're built on high mountains, and they may have high towers and may have fenced them in to defend themselves against invasion. But what he's saying, the day of the Lord is going to be on all those things. You can bar your doors. You can make your city gates out of oak, of Bashan, and your homes out of cedar so the bugs don't eat it. But the fire of the Assyrians invading is going to burn everything down. Your towers will not defend you. Your walls will not keep them out. The ships of Tarshish that brought you riches, that brought the cedars of Lebanon. The cedars of Lebanon came by ship down the coast to Jerusalem, or to the coast, and then brought up to Jerusalem on ships of Tarshish, bringing all kinds of costly goods for Solomon in his glory and for the kings of Judah. All pleasant pictures. And I think I looked, I'm looking forward to getting my new glasses because I'm getting bifocals for the first time. So I can actually use my Bible here technically speaking, in the Bible study without having to like go like this to be able to read it. But let's just see here. I should have this open to Isaiah right away, right? All right. Verse. Okay, here we go. Now, what word was I looking for? Lebanon, the White Mountain, all Haman's. Pleasant pictures. From the root to surmount something conspicuous and pleasant being delight. Yeah, pictures, obviously that means photographs, right? Because they didn't have photographs. And they probably don't mean paintings either because they didn't make graven images. But they mean all pictures is probably not the right word, but more like ornamentation. All the because there would be like carvings and beautiful things that would create for people to look at, like as far as ornamentations of the temple, ornamentations of the king's house. Though the temple wasn't burned, but the kingdom of Israel in the north, Samaria, the city was taken. Jerusalem was not. But from the city of Samaria, they would lose all their, pleasant pictures would refer to every. Well, I think, actually I should look up what, let's see what modern translators have made of this. Because our knowledge of Hebrew has expanded since the King James was translated. I am not a King James only person. I've said that on many occasions, right? So there's pleasant pictures. I'm not, pleasant is one word. It means kemda, of delight or desire. Skia, picture. It just weirds to me that they have a word picture. But it's so uncommon. Is that refer to a flat image drawn? Because I'd really like to know. Okay, look at it. Brown Driver Briggs says, noun feminine. Very dubious. It's only plural construct, meaning it came in the plural. Perhaps a general term. They refer to imagery as attracting the gaze. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's not, it could refer to the idolatry they practice, but they say idols. They have idols. But obviously this word, if you look at it, there's not a lot here they have to say. Definition of Benjamite. Oh. Now here's the Englishman's Concordance. It's used in Hebrews 2, Isaiah 2:6 only in the entire Bible. That's why it's hard to tell what it means. Oh, I'm sorry. Dummy. I didn't have it up there. I'm going to show you here the little. Here we have a word, skia. We'll look over here on the right, the Englishman's Concordance. It only occurs in this passage, Isaiah 2:6. One occurrence in the whole Bible. So we don't have a lot to compare it with. And we can see in the New American Standard, the International Version also, they have craft instead of pictures, which to me makes a lot more sense. All the beautiful craft, the beautiful craftsmanship. Picture is something, imagery, visible, like it says in Strong's, a conspicuous object, something to be looked at. Which craft, because things, we have things like, something to be looked at is a perfect example. I don't have a lot of stuff, but I think, like little precious moments statues, right? What's the purpose? No purpose. They're just for looking at. They're just little baubles that are for looking at. There's no other purpose for them, except for some people. I know some people think of it as some sort of investment, but they're not really worth much money. As far as not much more. They were worth when they were made, when they were new. I know a lot of people thought they would be something special, and maybe if everyone throws theirs away, yeah, maybe. In 100 years, they'll be worth something. I actually don't know much about that particular. So if someone's like, precious moments are still very, very big collectors. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get into your business. It's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. But there are things in life, everyone has them in their house because you're giving them as gifts sometimes. Like, oh, look at, it's a thing to put on a shelf somewhere, and it's to look at. I'm not saying it refers to those specifically, but to everything like it, to things that have no purpose, but that are just ornamentation of life. Only people that got time to ornament their life are usually wealth, or usually if you have an ornament in life, there's something special, some keepsake. A poor man is probably going to have very few of those. He's not going to have a lot of room in his life for a lot of knickknacks. But they are, but those things are also symbolic to me, like the little statues, not of idols, but of all the nice things in the world that people set their hearts on. Because, nobody worships the precious moments figurines, though, it was always cautioned, because of the prevalence of idolatry in the Old Testament, they were forbidden from making, or at least is my thing, because an idol is nothing, an image is nothing, except what you empower it with in your mind. So I don't have a lot of, I'm not particularly worried about figurines or toys or stuff that people, there for the, I'm not particularly worried about that stuff as causing idolatry. Though I do think in some ways the toys do create a form of idolatry in some people. In the absence of faith, I see a lot of people for whom the pop culture is like their religion. These are the stories they think about, they meditate on, they get excited about, what's Captain America up to, and they can be almost idolatrous as far as, because even though people don't worship the actual things, but it's the production. It's not quite idolatry, but it's definitely idolatry light. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch movies that have products that are like figures or anything. Some people might, I guess. I don't know. But I don't say you shouldn't watch it, but certainly some people, because they have no faith, it almost substitutes for a faith. It's a very shallow sort of existence to have that like filling up that space. I almost don't even see how it can function as any kind of religious thing. That's why I just don't. I don't. Yeah, I mean, it has to have some sort of doctrinal component, some sort of. I don't know. I don't know exactly. I mean, I'm not into knickknacks. Am I? I am a little. Well, I don't know. Whenever I find my old Hot Wheels or Matchbox cars from the 70s, I'm always sticking them up on my shelf because I realized that now it's like, oh yeah, maybe 20 years ago I didn't value them, but now I'm like, oh, look at my old car. Having a collection of little Matchbox cars, I suppose, or even little figures from a movie, it doesn't have to be idolatry. I would just say, how extensive is this? How much time is this taking up? I mean, like, do you feel that it's interfering? I mean, a lot of times these things are matters of conscience. At least in the New Testament for me, it's like, because an idol is nothing to begin with. I mean, except for what you make of it. Except when you give it power. It is something. When your conscience is marked that way. So the loftiness of man, so all the pleasant pictures, and the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of men shall be made low. And the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. That's the day in which the Lord alone. So I have trouble, though I do see the day of the Lord as being potentially the whole time. And it's funny I make this argument, right? Because actually I'm making the argument that rapture people make, aren't I? But it's just a. But the thing is, it's not. This is not. I'm not making a statement of fact so much as like this is a way of looking at it. If you aren't familiar with the argument the rapture people make, it's this, that we are saved from the day of the Lord, and the day of the Lord is the whole tribulation. And while I think that's true, that we are, that the tribulation can be, the whole thing can be referred to as the day of the Lord. Within the tribulation, there is a specific day that Jesus returns that is really the day of the Lord we're looking forward to. Let me tell you, if you're a tribulation saint, as they call them, you're going to be, when you're in the time of the Antichrist, you're going to look forward to the day of the Lord. Because the day of the Antichrist is not going to feel like the day of the Lord. Though, in some respects, it is. Because it is the day in which God's promises are being fulfilled. But it's not, it's that aspect, I don't know. The day of the Lord is darkness and not light. And it depends on where you're standing on the day of the Lord. When the day of the Lord comes, if we are in good standing with God, it's going to be a day of light and joy. And if you're in bad standing with God, it's going to be a day of fear and darkness. It's darkness and not light. It's not going to be anything that they're going to look forward to. The Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. And the day of the Lord, the ultimate end of the day of the Lord, the purpose of the day of the Lord is to exalt the Lord. And he will be. He will be exalted in judgment. He will be exalted in the things and bring him to pass the things he promised. And fulfilling that word is very important. In verse 18, he would make the idols utterly abolished. He would utterly abolish the idols, the false gods. And you could say in the interim that this did come to pass for Israel as far as a nation, that idolatry after the Babylonian invasion, idolatry was never again a widespread problem in Israel. And they shall go to the holes of the rocks, and the caves of the earth, for fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake terribly the earth. We read this yesterday also about the caves. The people, it's not necessarily literally true, but it can be literally true, of course. It doesn't have to be, is what I'm saying. Because it's more of their desire. I mean, do I think there'll be someone going to a cave somewhere? Yes, of course. There'll be somebody somewhere probably literally fulfilling this. Though that doesn't have to be. But, the idea that everyone's going to go into a cave is silly. I mean, but what it's saying is it's indicating a state of mind. They'll be wanting caves. They'll be looking for caves. They'll want to climb in the deepest, darkest hole they can find and disappear. That's what it's saying. That's a great way to put it. It really communicates to our sensibilities. They'll want to climb and crawl into the deepest, darkest hole and disappear when God appears. They're going to want to hide themselves. And they're going to say, all right, now I'm in the cave. All I lack is for the cave to collapse on me and hide me forever from God. And that's good. Because they're not, when God first appears, when the Lord Jesus appears, the heavens are open, the white horse appears, and the Lord Jesus makes his way back to earth. It's like, you think about that, people aren't going to really know what's going to happen next. And a lot of them believe in hell. Eternal torment. I believe in hell, but in a different way. I don't believe in hell in the way that most people do, but I believe it in what I think is a scriptural way. But without getting into that, now I'm just to satisfy people's curiosity. Yes, I'm an annihilationist, even though I don't like the term. I don't dislike the term. I just think it's like, I don't know. I believe in death and in the resurrection of the dead. I think I'm a Christian. We don't. Shall we call people who believe in hell torturists? They're torturists. They believe in torture forever. They believe the torment forever in Revelation is literal, and the death is only symbolic. Well, I believe the opposite, that the death is literal and the torment is symbolic. And you got to tell me why it has to be that way and not the opposite. I challenge anyone to tell me why. As far as let's have a discussion. I've had discussions with people. In fact, on my website, I've had this debate before, and I do have more arguments and more material, which I hope to eventually put together into most of it gets shared, I think. Going to the holes of the rocks, to caves. Oh, but they won't know what to expect. I mean, they'll be thinking, maybe they'll be hiding because they'll want the mountains to fall on them and hide them because they'll feel They don't want to be with God. They don't want to fall into his judgment. They're terrified of what their judgment will be. Maybe they'll be tortured eternally. It's not a prospect I would wake up, today's the first day of my eternal torment, and be particularly excited about it. And I want to, today. Oh, it's the Lord's day. I guess it's the day I start my eternal torture. You know, no one's going to wake up excited for that. So they're going to be hiding. He will arise to shake terribly the earth. As the book of Revelation says, there will be an earthquake such as has not been since the day that God created man on the face of the earth. I know I can't quote that passage. Such as was not from the beginning of the creation which God created even till this time. I think it's Revelation 11. I'm Isaiah, not 11. I was going to just get the verse real quick. Is it Revelation 11? Let's see. Oh, I got the wrong. Let me see. I gotta go before the third wall. No, not Revelation 11. It's not that one. It's gonna be at 16 then. In 16 we have the other earthquake. Well, not. I don't know if it's a different earthquake, but a different description. But the description I want is this. And there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. Revelation 16:18. God is going to shake terribly the earth in his day. And the loftiness of man. Oh, it jumped back on me, didn't it? Okay. In that day shall man cast his idols of silver, his idols of gold, which they made everyone for himself to worship, to the moles and to the bats. The second reference to the moles and the bats, isn't it? Or am I just out of my mind? I think I read it. Yeah, right. I read through this. I read all the way to the end. That's right. That's why I'm remembering it. Yesterday I read this. Because we read it and we didn't want to skip through it. Because we're going to start chapter 3 actually before we get done here. So I'm not going to just stretch this out needlessly. They will cast it to the moles and the bats, meaning into caves to get. They'll want to hide that too. They'll want to hide their wealth and their idols. Obviously, not just the idol, but their idols of what They are gold and silver idols. A lot of poor people had idols of, wood and stone, but obviously the rich could have theirs overlaid with silver and gold to make them really nice. So go to the tops of the ragged rocks for fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty. What's interesting is, I remember seeing a documentary on, I think it was the Romans. And, it was the Romans because it was actually Herculaneum. You've heard of Pompeii, right? Pompeii is a city that was destroyed by the Mount Vesuvius exploding back in the Roman day. And so the Herculaneum was like the town next door, which actually got worse. It got buried worse under more ash, I believe. And so it got preserved better, actually. And one of the things they found there was a house with the household gods still intact. And it was like a little case, almost like a house. And in it, there were these little recesses in which they had the gods. Fascinating. I've never actually seen that, like the household gods. They had literally... And we have Zeus, and we have, they had a little set of gods to pray to and stuff. And then they shall man because of Moses and the bats. Okay, to go into the clefts of the rocks, they want to get rid of their idols. They don't want to be associated with their idols, and also, I think, as a corollary, their wealth. Because I do think wealth also is worthless. Obviously, in the day of the Lord, when God returns, wealth becomes worthless. Remember, the city of God, the streets are paved with gold. The foundations are precious stones, which means they're not worth anything. You know what I mean? We'll build the city out of them. I'll pave my, it's always considered silly. Like when someone makes a toilet out of gold. Or they, no one ever makes a toilet out of gold, by the way. What they do is they maybe overlay it with gold. Nobody makes it out of gold. If they do, it's stupid because it's a waste of gold. Your butt can only touch the external part. You know what I mean? Like the inside makes it needlessly heavy. I don't think you can get a solid gold toilet. Maybe I'm wrong. It's probably not 24 karat though, because you know how expensive that would be. Man, just for a toilet. I mean, really? I remember someone told me in Saudi Arabia there are people who have, you know, golden toilets and faucets and golden. They're not made out of gold, solid gold. Come on, really? That'd be interesting. So they're throwing away their idols, their silver, their gold, to go into the tops of the ragged rocks, to the clefts of the rocks. And again, it's just saying their spirit. It's giving us a look into their spiritual state, which is they want to flee from God. Fall on us. You know, it is in the book of Revelation. Fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come. They go to the mountains and rocks and say, fall on us, fall on us. They want to hide. That's what's going to happen. Man, you know, what he's saying is, it could have been so good. And the truth is, and after I come, it will be good. But I got to come first and set things straight. It would be nice if we had obeyed, kept the covenant, and the Jews, I mean. And when I say we, I'm not Jewish. I'm just, I identify with them because as a Christian, the teaching is that we are grafted in. Like a wild vine grafted into a cultivated one. We are part of the family of God, part of the covenant of Abraham. So when I say we, I do feel an affinity with them because of that, of course. But no, what was the point? Oh, just that Israel and Judah, the Jews. What was the point? Wish I could quickly rewind. I forgot to record today. Darn, that means I'm gonna have to download it. Oh, that's good. Or whatever. I started recording for some reason. I should just stop. Man, I'm gonna record the rest of it in case something goes wrong. Why, the last 10 minutes? Really, Paul? No, stop. Don't be silly. Wasting hard drive space. We'll just download it. So the Israel, what was it, Israel? I feel affinity for them, but what we did, what was about? Oh, yeah. If we had been, if you'd be willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. And not only that, you'll be a light to the nations. And Israel will still be a light to the nations. But there's going to be the day of the Lord first, in which he has to set things straight, in which he has to prune, in which he has to purge, where he has to refine. He's going to refine the church. He's going to take the corruptors out of it. He's going to refine the Jews and take the unbelievers out of them. He's going to refine us all so that which remains is pure. At least those of us who take part in the first resurrection. But for all people, the world is going to be changed. And the world's going to become a better place. And they are going to say, come up and go to the mountain of the house of the Lord. But it's going to have to come through this. Instead of coming through obedience and willingness, it's going to come through horror and fear. The last line, cease from man whose breath is in his nostrils, for wherein is he to be accounted of? It's funny for me, when I was first a Christian, this was like these verses like this were things that like, the kind of verse I felt like I wanted to memorize. Because I wanted to tell people. Because I felt like everyone I ran into was trusting their pastor, trusting their religious leader. I remember in high school I had a friend, and I believe we were living in the end times. And I was wrong. I was wrong. We were not living in the end times in 1989. That's a long time ago. It's more than 7 years. That was not the end times. And every preacher that still says we're in the end times has been saying so since then. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to people that say that. They're false prophets. especially if they said it before. Someone saying it today for the first time could be right. I mean, it's a little premature. To call it premature. I don't know if it's technically makes you a false prophet, but it definitely makes you a incompetent teacher. Let's say that. People who teach you that you're in the end times, they're incompetent. They don't know what they're talking about. You're not living in the end times. Not yet. Maybe maybe we've just started and we don't realize it yet. Possible. But were we living in the end times in 1989? No, sir. Not even close. And I just picked that date. That was, I was 15 in 1989. It was the year, second half of my freshman year. 89. I gauge a lot of stuff by that. 85 was my last year in 6th grade. 89 was my first year in high school. But I like this because, I've been talking about doing this research for beginners, and this is one of the first things I would talk about. The role that other people have, because people, do you have resources? Maybe I do. How do you know you can trust them? You can't. You shouldn't. Don't. We need to rely on the Lord. Sometimes people put too much trust in men. They put too much trust in men to tell them right from wrong, to teach them the very doctrines on which they are staking their souls. Or they're staking their souls on what this guy says. It seems, I should take a personal interest in things my soul is staked on. Like I should take a personal... Maybe I should pay some, maybe this is one of those things I should take care of myself on some level. I should take responsibility for. And that's true. Our salvation is not the responsibility. Your salvation is not your pastor's responsibility. It's not your preacher's responsibility. It's not your mom and dad's responsibility. It's your responsibility. As far as living out your salvation. I don't mean earning it or any nonsense. I mean the fact that you're a Christian, you say you're a Christian, you believe in Christ. Finding out about Christ, living that out is no one's responsibility but yours. You know what I mean? No one else but you. We have to answer for the things done in our bodies. Every man will answer for themselves. Now, I may answer, like let's say I misteach in such a way and badly that it causes a lot of people to go astray. I will answer for that. But they will answer for themselves also. They're not going to like, well, he misled you, so you get a free pass. No. They that are led of them are destroyed. That's coming up. You get misled, you get destroyed. Don't be misled. So, well, how do I, the way we stop being misled is we put our trust in Christ. That doesn't mean I trust Christ. I can listen to whatever man says. Because Christ wouldn't let a man lie to me. CC for man, his breath is in his nostrils. God's breath is the Spirit of God, is his Holy Spirit. It isn't in his nostrils, it's everywhere. Man's breath is in his nostrils, and when it goes out, he expires and dies. What can you count? Wherein is man to be accounted of? What can we say for man? How reliable is man when it comes to this? When it comes to your security, when it comes to your safety, when you're talking, you're going to leave that. I mean, look at. Here I sit in good conscience, trying to teach the Word of God. Trying to get people to listen. I'm telling people don't listen. Well, if I was doing my thing on beginners, what I would say is there's a bit of a both. We have to listen. How can you, God ordained that the gospel would be preached of men. Men preach the gospel. Men wrote the Bible. But even in the midst of that, you will have to trust people to some degree. For example, look here, I use the Strong's Concordance, the Brown Driver Briggs, all this. I got to kind of trust that this is at least somewhat accurate. I don't totally trust it, actually. I watch, because of my experience with the Strong's Concordance, I know that everything is not always accurate in these study tools. There are errors. I have a Green's Interlinear Bible. It has a Strong's Concordance number. Sometimes the numbers are transposed. Instead of 53, it's 35. 56, 53, no, it's 56, 35. Or instead of 56, 53, it's 53, 56. There's a lot of typos and misspellings and all kinds of things, and it's a legit tool that's been around for decades. Nobody's fixed it. But more than that, there's so many ways. Here's the thing. When you're letting your salvation slide and you're not really, you're not in touch with God. You're not praying. Your mind isn't on God. We're living day to day without thinking about the Lord. If we're in that position. And then we think, well, but we're going to church and we can just rely on that to provide enough. If I'm lacking something critical in the faith and the pastor isn't warning me, you know what I mean? Because at the same time, if my attitude, like if I have an attitude towards my faith that is like lazy, like I don't want to do much, I don't want to learn much, I don't want to think about it much. There are far more important things to deal with than my religion. If that's my attitude, if that's my practical attitude, almost no one says that, but they act that way. They act that way. They don't say it, but they act it out. You know what I mean? Because they consistently go to those things. They consistently embroil themselves in those things. And they are not attentive to their faith. Well, if I do that, the problem is I'm going to seek out just the kind of preacher that's going to betray me and to leave me wanting, to leave me in the lurch. But I'm going to think this guy is going to help me because he's going to be the kind of preacher that's going to encourage me to just sit there and listen to him talk about, marriage, child rearing, and a lot of other corollary subjects, which are interesting and important for Christians to know about, but not the core of the gospel. I mean, I talk about those things, right? And they talk about the core of the gospel too. Some do, some don't. Some give you the knowledge you need, some do not. But here's the thing, if you're not attentive to your own faith, you won't know enough to know the difference of when you're being ripped off by a preacher and trusting in a man who does not deserve your trust. If you know God, you will know the brothers who you can trust. Or at least you'll have enough of a shielding of faith and of knowledge so that you're not going to be as much hazard if you do trust someone a little. You know what I mean? Enough to maybe... The thing is, trust in what way? To listen? You don't need any trust to listen, maybe some. But to internalize what someone's teaching, to take it for doctrine, to take it for truth, that requires trust. Now, this isn't specifically here in Isaiah. This isn't about doctrine. This is about trusting in people for your safety. Same thing, though, because safety, salvation, is the same thing. We're trying to be safe from the lake of fire, trying to be safe from death. And that's all they're trying to save their people from death. They're trying to build strong cities, So also in the church, people try to build strong cities out of doctrine. To build you like a city, that is with an iron gate and an iron bar and buttresses and battlements and, murder holes or whatever. You've got all the accoutrements necessary to be a well-defended place. So you can go and listen to whatever. But a new person's looking for someone to tell them everything because they don't know anything. So I don't know, maybe I'll do it right. If I start right after the study, it's an hour. I did finish the chapter. We didn't get into 3. I said we would, sorry. But we did finish the chapter, which I did say we would definitely do, which is exactly right? Man will lead you astray. When I was young, I was obsessed with this because the thought of men, when I realized religion was like, there was a major scam in a lot of it. A lot of guys were just doing the job. A lot of pastors are sorely derelict. They're just going through the motions, just like their congregation. Here's the thing. If you're going through the motions as a Christian, you're almost certainly likely to end up with a pastor who's going through the motions. You know why? Because if you got a good pastor, the kind that you ought to trust, who are good Christians, who are brothers, who you can have, you can trust your brothers. They say trust not a brother, trust not a wife, right? But I trust my wife. I trust my brother. Because they're not just my wife and brother, they're also brothers in Christ. So I do trust them explicitly. Implicitly, I trust them both implicitly and explicitly. I'm not even sure what that means. Like implied trust means I don't have to say so, I guess, right? Without saying? Is that implicitly? I guess I do trust them without saying so. And they know it. I don't trust them with everything, obviously, so I wouldn't let them work on my car. But I do trust them in matters of the faith. You know what I mean? And so certain people are trustworthy in matters because they're brethren. And they're true. They're true like the Apostle Paul. Trustworthy. Honest. That's how we should be. Because new believers are trusting us somewhat. But let me tell you this. When you're a new believer, you're almost helpless. You're going to have to listen to people. You can read the Bible. I tried that. I'm really smart. I don't like to brag about it, but I will. Okay, when I was like, I don't like to brag about it, but I do is what I should say. I don't like to brag about it. I don't get a kick out of bragging about it because it's always been just to me whatever. Because I never did anything to earn it. I didn't even work for it. Like when I was a kid, I'd score out. We'd do these Iowa tests. I was always the 99th percentile, or 98th, depending on the subject. 98, 99. On most subjects growing up. When I took my ACT test, I scored overall 31. 36 is perfect. I got a perfect score on the reading section. So when I want to read, at least according to the ACT test, I can read with perfect comprehension. But I was focused on that test. Sometimes, there have been many times where I misread things, and it's funny because I always laugh and say, and I have perfect comprehension. So I'll brag about my intelligence just a bit, just for the purpose of this. I'm smart, right? I can read. But when I picked up the Bible at 19, when I wanted to take my faith seriously, I couldn't figure it out. I told you at the beginning of Isaiah, the ox knows his master and his ass his master's crib. The ox knows his owner and the ass his master's crib, but my people don't. I didn't really understand what is it talking. I kind of get it now, but even at the time, it was so opaque. It was such a symbolic thing. I hadn't really encountered symbolism much. I hadn't given it much thought. I was mostly concerned with the external world and my own life, my social life, and stuff like that. That's what I was concerned about previously. I couldn't make heads or tails. I needed someone. Think about the Ethiopian eunuch. He was reading the Bible and he come across Andrew. And Andrew's like, do you understand what you read? And he's like, no, how can I if someone won't explain it to me? Who is he talking about? What is this? So you need teachers. CC for man is good, but it's like, even at the time when I was obsessed with this, I was studying with a man. Fortunately, I took this teaching seriously, and I also studied him and found him wanting. Maybe you'll find me wanting. I probably am. I definitely am. People have found me wanting. Certainly, when it comes to depth of skill or depth of, like knowledge, this kind of knowledge, not too good. I'm using a reference because I don't have the training or the skill. I'm not particularly skilled with other languages. I've never shown any particular aptitude. Except for pronunciation. I can speak Spanish beautifully without an accent. Actually, it's funny. But anyways, but I have no skill in language. But the point is, I'm lacking certain things, fine, but I can teach you so much. And I can teach you enough of the right things and enough of the good things. You can take a knowledge base that maybe isn't perfect, but then transform that into yourself into something that you can use to judge others, to judge other teachers, and to compare, and to judge what you're reading and to judge your own ideas. And the thing is, you shouldn't totally trust me, but you should trust me enough to sit down and listen and get what you can gain, but also not just internalize everything as if it's gospel truth. Because I'm enjoying this study as though it's impromptu. There's no preparation other than 25 years of I've been through this. I sing this. I've memorized this passage. I'm not doing any special research, but it's a passage I'm familiar with. So my point is, you got to rely on brethren to some degree, but be careful which brethren you rely on. And for God's sake, don't just rely on one brother to guide you through everything. You know what I mean? You should have other people, because one person, you get listening to one guy all the time, and it can magnify their errors. Because what if, like I had a young man who was studying with me, and I guess I became pretty influential on him as a young person, as will happen. Arnold Murray was very influential on me. But then when I talked to him later, and he was complaining about how the things I said had caused him to behave in a certain way towards people, other believers. And I was like, really? I'm like, wow. I'm like, and then he told me, I'm like, wow. When I said that, I didn't really want you to take it that way or to do that. I'm like, but I totally see why the way I taught things, because I didn't consider listeners. When I first started, I had no listeners. I just recorded the Bible study because my wife was listening, and people in church might listen, or what I was putting out there for people to listen. But I primarily, since I had no listeners, I wasn't very mindful of listeners, But now I am mindful of the listener, and I've learned. We should all learn from people, but like I said, if I don't take an interest in my faith, if I don't take a personal interest in what I'm learning, and make sure I learn it right, and make sure I'm being taught it right, because this is religion. This is not auto mechanics. This is not carpentry, where there's kind of a right way to do it. I mean, well, no, there is a right way to do religion, of course. But what I mean is, carpentry, though, I probably opened a can of worms there, because not everyone agrees on how to do carpentry. Okay, there's consensus on certain things, but not everyone is in total agreement about every aspect of these things. But anyways, something like accountancy. I mean, it's very cut and dry, very, how you do accounting is how you do accounting. How you do religion, there's one way, but for you, your walk is your walk. You know what I mean? Well, what I mean is, what it was about, when you go to a school to learn accounting, you're probably going to learn it right, because there'll be a textbook, the teacher, there's multiple things, and the textbook is laid out. You can still learn it wrong by not studying right, by not really reading the book, or the book might have errors. But for the most part, you're going to trust that everything's correct. Well, in religion, it's a little different, because the Bible has to be interpreted, and anyone who says otherwise is nuts. Like, if you think the Bible doesn't need interpretation, you can just take the whole thing literally. We could just get started on that one. I could prove it wrong in just a few moments. You start looking at passages. That literal, that literal, that literal, that literal. No. Of course not that. Of course not that. Of course that's not literal. Of course. But everything else is, right? Okay, yeah. Just not that. Just not the thing that's obviously not literal. Is there a passage in the Bible where it tells you to take everything literally that's written in the scripture? It's a self-refuting doctrine. Like, fundamentalism doesn't even make sense. There's no biblical internal reason to be a fundamentalist. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't... If you consider the fact of the New Testament, if you consider that the New Testament exists, that the old covenant got done away with, the covenant which was supposed to be forever, at least for the Israelites, it got done away with, and a new was provided. Just that right there should tell you, it's different. It's not going to be as... There's a more nuance to religion than there is to things like accountancy. So you can get a bad teacher and a bad textbook. There is no, because this is not a mechanistic process. This is not adding and subtracting. There's a lot more going on when it comes to faith. All right, we're done. Thanks for joining me in this study. We'll be back to do chapter 3 tomorrow. We'll get started on that. Until then, I look forward to seeing you again, or to being here again, and being seen by you again.
Enter into the rock and hide thee in the dust, for fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humble, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed.